Tuesday, February 4th, 9 o'clock on this fine morning. Talk quick about the market, some names I'm looking at. Go from there. S&P has been bouncing around. It was solidly in the green overnight, right at the right at the midnight hour, sold off on reports China was doing a little tit for tat tariff, um, announced 10% tariffs on some select items from the US, and then announced investigations to Google, PVH, some other names, but those won't start for another week. So to me, it's more posturing, and we'll see what happens. Supposedly, POTUS is going to speak to President Z in this week. So we'll see how that goes with the markets. But yesterday, it was all the hype, and over the weekend was about tariffs, tariffs, tariffs. And then what happened in the morning? We had a conversation with Mexico, and Mexico said they're sending 10,000 troops to the border and what have you. So then markets reverse some of the losses. And then after the close, similar situation with Canada. They announced a task force, 10,000 troops going to the border. So we'll see how things play out with China. And I'm sure there'll be some kind of agreement because I think there's less. Trump has already had this with China, so I think they're going to work something out. And that's why I'm somewhat bullish here on the China ADRs, because I don't think it's going to take much for them to really start to break out. So if you take a look at the markets, the SPY, that 600 handle has been a rock on support during market hours and resistance during market hours. Tried to get above that yesterday, 629, then reversed it at the end of the day. Maybe today's the day here, but possibly more chop. After the close today, we get Google. So that'll be a big report. Thursday, we get Amazon. And then Friday's the big jobs report. It's probably, especially with the hawkish Fed, you probably want to see a weaker than expected number. So that's kind of overall markets. Would not be surprised to see some headlines, right? It's going to happen. There's been hints, and I think some of the hints on the week I was talking about in the rant yesterday afternoon. It's kind of ironic that the tariffs were rumored to be pushed back a month on Friday, and then the press secretary, she reiterated, nope, it's going to be effective at start of February. And then now you hear the deals yesterday, and oh, wait a second, they are going to be pushed back a month. So it's almost like this is all, I wouldn't say premeditated, but a lot of this is, this plan is working out. That's what it looks like. They already have what they're going to do. So we'll see what happens here with the EU, because it sounds like that's the next step. There'll be headlines. It'll hit some point, and I'm sure there'll be a reaction. It's probably gonna be negative on markets. So it's definitely something to be aware of. All right, so that's overall markets. So individual names. I talked about it yesterday with SSYS. I did those calls a couple of weeks back. The March strikes, they look like death, and then sure enough, what happens? SSYS gets an investment from a fund, $120 million, $10.30 shares newly issued. And then they announced their preliminary revenue guidance, well above expectations. This morning, I guess they're at a conference, a medtech conference in Arizona or out west. Just had a press release this morning expanding their market opportunity into medtech. I mean, the 3D sector, there's so many opportunities that, we'll see how things play out. But I put on the watch list yesterday. I put it again this morning. If it holds the gains, I think it has the opportunity to head much higher. So $14 the next handle. I think that's the next spot it's going to test in the coming days. And then, don't be surprised if I continue to add some strikes. So I was a little not skeptical, but being cautious yesterday because I didn't know what headlines were going to come out overnight. But I'll probably add some more strikes here on SSYS this morning on any strength. And, longer chart at the middle of 2023 with all the buyout rumors and what have you was in the 20s. Not saying it goes back there, but there's opportunity. That's SSYS. Got the calls I put on the watch list yesterday morning for possible deja vu. Shopify was selling off in the pre-market all the way down to 106 because of the tariffs with Canada, right? And considering Shopify is a Canadian company, it seems like, to me, it's like comical. So it bounced at the open. I was trying to get some strikes. I got some. It ran up to 115 and kind of chopped around for the rest of the session. They got close to being a double this morning. Well, after the news was announced in the after-hour session yesterday, Shopify was up to 117 or so. I think it heads back over 120. You also have the possible sympathy move with Amazon earnings Thursday. So 121 and change was the highs I hit last Friday. I think that's the first target. But I'll use any opportunity to lock some of the calls I got in yesterday to cover costs, and then I'll ride the rest. But I think a great setup. If you look at the chart two, the 50-day moving average is 110, and that's kind of where we came down yesterday. 110. What we hit 110.55. The 50-day was 110.27. So good sign there. Like that one for a nice move. That's that is Baidu. I added some more strikes, and like I've said just earlier, I think that China ADRs are just on the cusp of a major breakout. I'll continue to look for opportunities to add more Baidu strikes. I think, especially if there's any conversation today, tonight, or tomorrow, I have to think Baidu's going to trade over $100 in coming days. Just my humble opinion. I've been wrong plenty of times on Baidu. I've been right plenty of times on Baidu, and the times I'm right have paid off many multi bags. So I think there's I don't know if it's this week, next week, it's going to happen. It's over its 50-day moving average, 285, 60, 87, and at 200-day at 90, it was 91.99. Now it's 91.79. If that breaks, I think it's off to the races. Not much update here on TripAdvisor. You can make the case there's a bull flag setting up. So of course I have calls. So anytime I say a bull flag, it comes with my bull goggles on. But if it holds here at $17, you can make the case from it was 15 and change, $2, at least into the mid 18s, if not higher. They report earnings February 20th. That's TripAdvisor. Then some other names here. Roku was actually down this morning. Spotify, another monster quarter this morning. The premiums are insane on Spotify to play. I mean, to even try and get some out of the money strikes, you have to go all the way up to like 700. So an unplayable name, but I think it just speaks to the how these content providers are doing. With we had Netflix, now we have Spotify, and when you have a aggregator like a company like Roku that just is the platform for it. I mean, how is that not bullish Roku? But we'll find out next week with Roku earnings. I was looking to get those February 105s maybe today on some strength. It was actually in the 81s in the pre-market, then all the way down to 77. I don't see any news for that, but it's bouncing back here. Hopefully it holds its ground and can rally today. Now, two other names for earnings. Align reports earnings after close tomorrow. I was looking for maybe some 265s. I was talking about the historicals. I think it was a 30-something% move in 2023 February earnings. But the plan would be not to hold the calls into earnings unless I'm able to ride some free. So that'll be the trade. The premiums, despite the stock was only down 1.6% yesterday, but some of the calls out of money strikes were down 50% plus. So if that happens again earlier in the morning, as the morning progresses, I'll look for some more strikes for premium builds, and then look to close those out before tomorrow close. That's the bell. DocuSign, I was mentioned on the rant yesterday afternoon. I was looking to get some strikes on that. It looked weak at the open. I went and got the Shopify and BIDU strikes, and then sure enough, it goes on a epic reversal all the way down to not from 91 and change all the way up to 97 by the end of the day. I think that comes in test 107 in the coming days. So don't be surprised if I add some strikes there. I also put the I wouldn't call it the dreaded because VKTX was a monster trade earlier in 2024. It just unfortunately I kept trying to get some monthly strikes to play for M&A, and here it is down to $31. Just it's kind of like mind-boggling, but it was down to $31 before it announced the oral data I think it was last March, and then the rest is history all the way up to 100, and then shorts came in as folks. I don't know if it's somebody, you listen to Kramer thinks it's because there's no buyout for the company. The issue is these bio names, I always say, is that just the long duration to actually getting a drug to market just makes an easy target for people to short the name. And then you see all these other drugs competitors coming out because they see the huge addressable market for the GLP-1 space. Interesting, historically speaking, the premiums are pretty cheap. So I was looking at like maybe the February 45s. It's like a spec lotto because VKTX has had some history of announcing or at least making comments that are bullish. So we'll see what happens. Don't be surprised. But I just had some spec calls, probably some monthly strikes. And then which brings me to my last slide here. I'm going to try and I used to do this years ago. And sometimes, time is a resource, right? I have finite time. So spending time doing some things, it kind of takes away from other things, but I'll try and put this on the watch list. I put on this morning's watch list just to get some ideas of what positions or options that I'm looking at, the strikes and maybe some possible entries. Because I think that's important, right? An important element of any trading is you have to have ideas, right? And then you think about the fundamentals, the technicals, the macroeconomic, the macro situation, everything that goes involved. I think, but it's important. If you don't have ideas, especially if stuff starts going, that's why, I always try to have hedges for, especially when the market's on the cusp of maybe a breakdown, because you don't want to be chasing something after the fact, because then you're going to be paying higher prices, right? So that's kind of some ideas for today. Probably if I was more bullish, DocuSign maybe. So an MDB I didn't add on the list here this morning. I'm sure the PLTR earnings are going to probably put a bid in names like Snow and ESTC and MDB. So don't be surprised if I add some more strikes on that one. And that's it, folks. Let's have a great day. I'll be back on audio later. Rock and roll.